Stands out. Gives a speech.
Good afternoon, Rotary Club of Flint. I'm used to saying it's Friday, and it's not Friday. It's Thursday, you still came, so I'm delighted. Let's hear it for adaptability. So good afternoon, everyone, and it is Thursday, October the 20th, 2022. That means today is Office Chocolate Day. So hopefully if you're going back to the office, maybe they've heard that and brought you some chocolate. It's also National Suspenders Day. Don't know if anybody's honoring that today. Wear purple for Domestic Violence Day. I kind of have a little pinkish purple in there. It's Conflict Resolution Day. And it's also World Statistics Day, which only occurs once every 1,825 days. True fact. So today we are going to be introducing Paul Ruzicki as our speaker. I understand I gave everybody a little heartburn last week with a little miscue in the slide deck. Sorry for that. I will pay my fine. But very glad to have you here today. And let's go ahead and proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And as Rotarians, we try to honor the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it be good and beneficial to all? And today we're going to have an inspirational message from Amy Prue.
So my first action is to absolve you from any fines that occur due to anything that's up. Presidents get away with anything. So as past president, you are absolved. I should probably do that differently or something. So I wanted to share a resource with you. Seems like I'm probably not alone in that I have a lot of people in my inner circle that are grieving. Grief has been part of our lives, probably elevated somewhat due to just coming through a pandemic. But I found a really interesting podcast, and it's called All There Is with Anderson Cooper. So the description is Anderson Cooper takes us on a deeply personal exploration of loss and grief. He starts recording while packing up the apartment of his late mother, Gloria Vanderbilt. Going through her journals and keepsakes, as well as things left behind by his father and brother, Cooper begins a series of emotional, moving conversations about people we lose, the things they leave behind, and how we live on with loss, laughter, and with love. So I just found the conversations to be incredibly poignant and meaningful. And one of the most important things that I think they shared is that grief does not have to break us. It can actually build us. And to always remember that we're not alone in our grief. And I think that's probably one of the most important things to keep reminding ourselves. I do have just my favorite quick prayer is, dear God, in the nighttime, remind me of the day. In the darkness, remind me of your light. I have confidence in the coming morning, and until then, I will stand strong. Amen.
Thank you so much, Amy and Rotarians. So yes, please enjoy your lunch. We will be shortly. All right, that was the subtle bell ring. So let's go ahead and we'll get underway with the business portion of our program. And by all means, continue to eat, continue to get dessert, whatever you might need to do. Before I start on any other announcements, I wanted to just inform the room that apparently that last week there was a Paul Harris Fellow pin that was left behind and found. So if you happen to be missing yours, you can feel free to check in with Amy Vanderput there at the registration desk that she may have found your pin. So one of the things that I wanted to have a chance to introduce today is something that you can look forward to over the next couple of weeks. That today, obviously, we're meeting on a Thursday, which is unusual and was required based on the circumstances with the food bank not being available tomorrow. But one of the things that we want to take the opportunity to take a look at, and this is something that the board has started to have some conversation around, is to inquire about whether continuing to meet in person on Friday at noon, if that's still the best time, day, format that suits the needs of the club right now. It may be that that's still the best time, but it might be that folks' needs have changed over the last few years. And so rather than make assumptions, you want to have the chance to gather some input from the club about what kind of meeting works best for you, how frequent, what kind of day. And so you can expect that starting next week, and we'll probably run it for a couple of weeks, that we'll have some paper surveys available to you at our weekly meeting. We'll also send out an email link for like a Survey Monkey. But if you are in person and can submit it in person, that would be preferable. So I just wanted to give that as kind of a heads up of something to look forward to. Some of the questions on there will be things like, do you want to meet in person in a formal meeting every week? Or would you want to do things like alternate a business meeting and perhaps like a social hour, late afternoon sort of thing? Those are some different options that clubs, not just in our area, but around the district, have been exploring. And so we wanted to open that up as a conversation piece to see if that's of interest, or maybe continuing as we have been still works for folks. But we just realized that for some folks over the past couple of years with COVID and whatnot, work habits have changed, perhaps your folks' priorities have shifted. And so we want to try to be adaptive and continue to meet the needs of our members. So do stay tuned for that. And if anybody has questions or concerns around that, you can feel free to reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to talk. But before going any further with the program, it gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity to make the Paul Harris Fellow presentation today. As you know, the Paul Harris Fellowship is named for Paul Harris, who founded Rotary with 3 business associates in Chicago in 1905. The fellowship was established in his honor in 1957 to express appreciation for a contribution of $1,000 to the humanitarian and educational programs of the Rotary Foundation. Those programs include an array of projects that save and invigorate the lives of people around the world and enhance international friendship and understanding. Foundation programs provide educational opportunities, food, shelter, potable water, healthcare, immunization for millions of people around the world. These activities are funded, implemented, and managed by Rotarians and Rotary clubs around the globe. Rotarians also designate a Paul Harris Fellow to recognize another person whose life demonstrates a shared purpose with the objectives and mission of the Rotary Foundation to build world understanding and peace. So today I'd like to invite up one of our own, Jean Dennis, who is being honored as a Paul Harris Fellow +8. Jean, if you'll join me up here. Jean, your contribution to the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International is allaying suffering, improving living conditions, and providing educational opportunities to people around the globe. It's a truly selfless action. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to present to you on behalf of the trustees of the Rotary Foundation this emblem of a Paul Harris Fellow +8. I can get the box open. And it's an appreciation of tangible and significant assistance given for the furtherance of a better understanding. And we hope that you will proudly wear this pin as a symbol of your personal commitment and of the commitment of Rotary around the world. Congratulations, Jean.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that I have an uncle, I had an uncle who's recently passed that was a member of the East Jordan Rotary Club for about 50 years. And during his tenure, he spent a lot of that time as chairman of the RI Foundation Committee. And his goal was to have 100% of all of the East Jordan Rotary members as volunteers. Before he died, he succeeded. Now, wouldn't that be a wonderful goal for this club? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Jean. And, you know, that is a important reminder that each of us in ways big and small can make a difference towards that. And so if you haven't considered making a contribution, even if it's $20, but if we had every Rotarian in this club making even a small contribution towards that, we would be able to collectively make quite an impact. And so thank you for that example, Jean, and a reminder of the ways that we can all be part of something that's truly meaningful. Something else that is truly meaningful is fellowship, right? Isn't that one of the reasons that we're Rotarians? And so I am happy to share some information, and I don't know, Fred, if you're going to want to share anything additional, feel free. But we have been looking at trying to increase the number of social activities that are available to us as a club, because part of the reason we've joined Rotary is to have fun. And so now that things have opened up quite a bit more, we have some opportunities to do that. So Fred and the service committee have been exploring the opportunity for us to do a Flint Firebirds game together. This is something that would be coordinated by our club, but open to Rotary clubs throughout our area. So we've got interest from other local clubs as well. And if we can arrange it on a night when they're playing Sarnia, then maybe we can even invite some of the Sarnia Rotary clubs over to our side of the bridge to join us for a game. So you can stay tuned as to the exact date, but we are looking at some options that would be either a Friday or Saturday night. That would be, you know, late November or early December. So that's kind of the general time frame we're looking at. Tickets would be $9 a piece, and it's also $10 to park. So just by a general show of hands, who thinks that if it's on a night that worked for you, that would be something that you'd be interested in doing? That's fabulous. That's like most of the room. So take that as encouragement, Fred, that yes, we are interested for sure. And we're also looking at the possibility of folks who want to have dinner together beforehand, that maybe we can make a reservation at someplace like Luigi's. So not that you would have to do both, but you know, we have some different options for fun in the store. So stay tuned. Anything you want to add, Fred?
No, well, yes, of course, there is. I'm a politician. I've got a quick audience. I cannot guarantee a victory if the referees will turn their head. Maybe a couple of good plays and one arrest. But beyond that, it'd be a quiet night.
All right. So no guaranteed victory for folks on Zoom, but maybe a fight or two. And I'm sure that we'll at least have some cowbell. I've been promised cowbell.
Oh, definitely. Two cowbell.
Woohoo, 2 cowbells. All right. Wanted to also share an announcement from the Fenton Rotary Club that they are going to be organizing a breakfast on Veterans Day. That's a national holiday, so we won't be meeting that Friday. But if you still want to gather with some other Rotarians in honor of Veterans Day, then you have that opportunity. The cost is $10 unless you're a veteran, in which case you have breakfast for free that day. It's going to be held at the Fenton Community Center at 7:30 in the morning. And they do ask that you RSVP. So information about that is here. And I believe it's also included in your weekly email. So if you are interested, please connect with Scott and let him know. All right, next I'd like to invite up Joel Fife, and he's going to share some information about World Polio Day.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good afternoon, everybody. Today is World Polio Day. One day, one focus, ending polio is their tagline. I don't know if that's up there or not. What is polio? You may be asking. Polio is a paralyzing and potentially deadly infectious disease that most commonly affects children under the age of 5. The virus spreads from person to person, typically through contaminated water. And then it can attack the nervous system. And I was with some friends at breakfast this morning, and I told them I may be speaking about polio. And he told me that when he was a kid, he remembers that day in 1955, when Dr. Jonas Salk first had the vaccine, that his parents cried upon the news. So it was obviously a huge deal back in the 50s, a little before my time, but I'm learning all about it. Amazing. Rotary has been working to eradicate polio for more than 35 years, and our goal of ridding the world of this disease is closer than ever. As a founding partner of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, we reduced cases by 99.9% since our first project and our first vaccine went to the Philippines in 1979. Rotary members like yourself have contributed more than $2.1 billion, countless volunteer hours to protect nearly 3 billion children in 122 countries of this paralyzing disease. Now, Rotary's advocacy efforts have played a role in decisions by governments that have also contributed 10 billion. Another person who has contributed mightily to Rotary is Bill Gates, the philanthropist. And one of the things he said is the world's progress in fighting polio might be one of the best kept secrets in global health. People don't know about it. They think it's over. Today, polio remains an endemic in only 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. But it's crucial to continue working to keep other countries polio-free. If all eradication efforts stop today, within 10 years, polio could paralyze as many as 200,000 children each year. So on behalf of Flint Rotary, I want to say thank you for your past commitment to trying to eradicate this disease, and please consider helping the future fight against polio. Thank you.
And Bill is the philanthropy chair for our club. And so if you've got any questions about how you can be involved with that, he or Ellen, the co-chair, certainly help you figure that part out. So thank you. Wanted to share some other good news. So I don't know if you recall, but when we were new-ish in COVID, one of the things that we had a chance to do was get some Zoom presenters from places that maybe we wouldn't otherwise get to hear. And one was a representative from an effort called Shelter Box that Rotary International has partnered with Shelter Box, and they provide emergency housing to places facing disasters of various human caused or climate change caused or other sorts. And ever since then, our club has been making $1,000 a year contribution towards Shelter Box. That's one way in which we use our pooled resources that we contribute each year in order to try to invest in doing something good for the world. And so we were just this past week honored with an award from Shelter Box, and that's to recognize the steadfast work that this club has been part of. So give yourselves a round of applause. Every person in this room has been part of this success. So when you hear about the disastrous flooding in Pakistan that displaced 33 million people, Shelter Box is there, and your dollars are at work trying to help allay that suffering. They're also involved in places ranging from Ukraine to Burkina Faso, and so Rotary and our club is part of all. So thank you. Okay, so if anybody read their announcement from this week, the email announcement, you know that there was a quiz promise. And I try to be a person of my word because I am a Rotarian. So hopefully you may remember last week's presentation from our own Michael Ford. And if you weren't able to be there, it was available on YouTube, and I did take a look at it, which is where I got the questions for our quiz. There are prizes. So I'm going to invite, if you know the answer, you don't have to raise your hand, just shout it out and do it loud enough that I can hear you, because I can say I'll do my best at identifying who gave the correct answer first. All right, so here we go. 3 questions. First one, What inventor had more inventions than any American except Thomas Edison, including the electric stove, and has a street named for him right here in Flint?
Open.
Oh, I heard Dave Perry. All right, he did take notes. That helps number your attention, doesn't it? All right, what occupation did Higgins, Burt, Houghton, and Mullet share? Oh, Ashley got it.
Michael Shea is gonna be so impressed that people won't remember it.
All right, last but not least, what famous military man who grew up in Michigan got his appointment to West Point because his girlfriend's dad was hoping to get rid of him?
Custer.
No.
All right, I'm impressed. You guys pay attention and retain stuff. That's pretty cool. All right, so thank you for the quiz. We will pass that to Michael J. that you all passed. And I want to give Bob Stabilski a chance to make a quick announcement, and then we'll move on from there. Bob?
All right, I'm gonna say it fine. But just let you know, the Death Charity is hosting this annual fundraiser on the 27th of Thursday. 5 to 7:30. And Saturday, being Thursday, to be that. So that's fun to go down. And to be interested in the ticket, which might $5 ticket, which is very reasonable. And it'll be a fun evening. And just contact me or
All right. Thank you very much, Bob. And for folks on Zoom who may not have heard that, Bob shared that next Thursday, the 27th, Catholic Charities is having their big annual fundraiser from 5 to 7:30. Tickets are $55. You can get them by seeing Bob or calling Catholic Charities. And the theme is MSU U of M. So you can feel free to share your spirit. All right. Any other announcements from the floor? Okay. In terms of health and welfare, I heard this week that it's been a few months now, but Sue Martinez is recovering from surgery. So she hasn't been here with us in person, but she is recovering at home. So please keep her in your thoughts. Any health and welfare announcements from the floor? Yeah.
Spoke with Steve Jagger this week. And he informed me that back in April, we had a leech in heart. But he's doing really well right now. I don't know. I asked him, I just want to better, but he's doing good.
Great, thanks, Nick. On Zoom, Nick was sharing that Steve Jadwin shared that he had a heart attack back in April, but he is recovering, he's doing well, and sends his regards. Okay, health, any other health and welfare? Okay, well, I know we have some guests today. So we've got some guests in the room, and would you like to introduce your guests?
Sure. Probably thought Valerie checked in, so Valerie might be here. We have East Dad, Dave Hunter, and his friend Bobby.
Hey, welcome. Dean, you've got a guest, I believe. The Dean just shared that he has his first wife with him. First and only.
I think we've met her before. I mean, the first
All right, we're so glad to have you here. And now, please Rotary, take out your raffle tickets. It's time for the raffle.
I shall be quick and to the point today. You want to hear something you told about politics? I have three winners, and Joe Plank, you seem to be honest today. Get a pick? But you carefully stir the pot.
Right.
Look them in the eye, are all winners, aren't they?
84226. 84226.
Oh,
Mrs. Dennis right there. Oh, no.
Fred,
Fred.
You want it, I picked you. Thank you.
Get a little elected official to draw for you, Fred.
84306.
Oh, that's me.
84306. Elizabeth. Congratulations. Second place.
Maybe make sure the president gets covered too.
You gotta cover all bases.
84227.
that
84227.
would be Fred.
The best part of it is the booze and the insult.
Yeah, we didn't get our steps in delivering that. Better luck next time. All right, well, it's my pleasure to bring up Rob Jewell, who is going to introduce our guest speaker for today.
I don't know if I can follow that. Well, we know that the elections and ballot proposals are upon us Tuesday, November the 8th, and the campaigning is underway. And again, as we did in the past, we encourage you to inform and educate yourself as to the issues, the candidates, and the ballot proposals. You know, as we shared with you before in past, we've been unsuccessful in holding our traditional candidate forums due to the respective campaigns and intent or their intent or availability. However, we are honored to welcome back the esteemed area political commentator and pundit Paul Rizicki, who will provide us some insights and observations on the upcoming elections, candidates, and ballot proposals. Today, he will focus on midterm elections, covering the county, the state, and our own congressional district, the 8th district. And next week, Flint municipal elections, covering, get this, Mott Community College, Flint Board of Education, and mayoral race, as well as the ballot proposals. Now, for those of you not familiar with Paul, he's a retired political professor at that renowned, diverse, inclusive, community-focused, national recognized Mott Community College. Did I get that right? Okay, Lynetta is the red cup there, okay? Now, prior to his coming to Mott Community College, he was originally a journalist in an Illinois daily newspaper. Did his undergraduate studies at Northern Illinois University, graduate study at Indiana University. He was also a faculty advisor to the student newspaper and also editor for the faculty newsletter. He's a political analyst for a number of the area media outlets. He's a moderator also for candidate panels. He's also a columnist for the East Village Magazine and president of the East Village Magazine board. I wonder if that has any conflict of nothing. Those of you may not be aware, he's also an author, a photographer, and a political memorabilia collector. Join me in a warm Rotarian welcome for the Paul Rizicki.
I can't live up to that, Rob. I agree. Yeah, let me do some of that stuff off. Please. Thank you, Rob. First to start, Joel, by the way, I do recall, I'm one of those that do recall getting the shot. I was about 10 or 11 years old, and my parents were very excited to hear about the polio shot. That made a difference in lives and a lot of people. We got a connection there. All right, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm going to talk to this. Midterms are normally not that big a deal, but this year they are. And for that reason, we're going to have a double header. As Rob said, we're going to cover basically the federal and state offices today, and then next week we're going to cover some of the local races and some of the ballot issues as well. A lot going on. And this may be one of the more unusual and significant midterm elections we've seen for an awful long time. Let me talk a little bit about, first of all, what midterms really are. They really are often one of the more overlooked kind of elections. Oh, by the way, before I start, the reason those magazines are on your table is that my column this month for East Village does cover the midterm elections. So an awful lot of what I'm saying there is in my column. Feel free to pick those up and take those home with you. That's why we brought a stack of those along. But as I say, in terms of midterm elections, usually midterms are bad news for the party in the White House. Over the last 60 or so years, the party in the White House typically has lost 30 or 35 seats in the US House, and depending on the year, 4 to 6 seats in the Senate. That may or may not be true this year as well. But again, all things considered, generally speaking, with a few exceptions, the party in the White House has had a kind of rough time the first year after the presidential election. People are kind of a little frustrated that the president didn't quite do all he said he was going to do. And that's particularly true when presidents are not very popular. This is certainly true of Joe Biden these days. His ratings are in the low to middle 40s at best. And so the kind of an ominous year for Democrats potentially in many ways. So again, the bottom line is that if Democrats lose 5 seats in the House, that changes the leadership of the House. That seems extremely likely. The Senate, of course, is 50-50. Change of 1 seat there could also lose the Democrats control of the Senate as well. As the way things look now, at this point, it seems very likely to me, and I think I'll be almost shocked, if the Democrats hang on to the House. As I say, given the history of the last 60 years, there aren't very many times when the party in the White House has gained seats. There have been a few. With one, you got to go back to FDR right after the 1932 election in the Great Depression. Another one was Bill Clinton right after the attempted impeachment of him, and then George W. Bush right after 9/11. But other than those, almost every other time the party in the White House has taken the beating in the midterm election. So that's going to be an issue, and that could be an issue here again for our local congressional candidates as well. The Senate might be a little closer. As I say, one advantage Democrats have got a couple of advantages really, is that this year there are 20 Republicans up and only 14 Democrats. So there are more Republicans at risk in this election. And secondly, Republicans have put up, frankly, some pretty flaky candidates. And as the Republican Party has gone more to the Trump Party, some of those candidates who won their primaries with Trump's endorsement may prove to be relatively weak for the general election. Although even now, to be honest with you, I'm a little surprised how strong some of them are running, considering the records that have popped up in the last month or so. So even those candidates who were deemed as being kind of poor candidates are still fairly competitive in states like Ohio, Georgia, Pennsylvania, to mention a couple. So to say all things considered, even the Senate, Democrats have got a chance of hanging on, maybe even gaining a seat there. Well, that's going to be a close call. No, all things considered. So again, this is going to be like probably a rough year for Democrats, and it's going to really mean an awful lot for the future of the next 2 years of where the Congress goes. The other thing about a midterm election, typically, one reason why it's a lot less important is that we have a lower turnout. For a presidential year, we'll turn out 60-65% of the vote, maybe a little more than that last year or so. For a midterm, typically we'll turn out about 40%, 45% of the votes. And maybe a little bit of this year, we'll see. But there's a huge drop off. A lot of folks who get excited about the presidential election don't feel all that excited about voting for their member of Congress or for their governor or their secretary of state or things like that. So again, the odds are we're going to see a lower turnout than we saw in 2 years ago. The implications of all of this, I think, though, are significant. First of all, assuming, and this may or may not happen, but assuming the Republicans take control of the House, maybe not the Senate, at the very least, several things are going to happen. At the very least, you're going to see almost certainly an end to the January 6th hearings. Those are going to wrap up anyhow, probably, but the chances of those going anywhere in the House are fairly minimal if the Republicans are in charge. In fact, they may turn it around, and all of a sudden we may see a bunch of investigations on Hunter Biden. Some people have talked almost about impeachment of Joe Biden, or whether that would go anywhere is debatable, but they may be attempted in some ways. Certainly, they would block any kind of elements of the Biden agenda if they were in charge of the House. And if there are Supreme Court appointments, clearly that's going to be an issue depending on what happens in the Senate. So there's some really major implications if and when we see the Republicans take control of the House and maybe the Democrats hang on to the Senate. Nationwide, there's an awful lot of things at stake here. 36 governors are up for election in the various states. It's secretaries of state and attorney generals in about 30 states. One big issue across the nation for an awful lot of those offices is the election denial. A significant number of candidates running for secretary of state, attorney general, even some for governors here and there around the nation, are those who have denied the outcome of the 2020 election. In addition, there's about 6,000 state lawmakers up for election and about 120 proposals on various state ballots all around the nation as well. We're talking about the ones here in Michigan next time around. I think the big issues this time, you've seen these all over the place in the ads, are abortion and the economy. I'm going to say the economy / inflation, those kind of joint. How those play out are really going to matter an awful lot. Clearly, for Democrats, the big issue for Democrats has been the abortion issue. Since the overturn of Roe Wade, you've seen every Democratic candidate pretty much hammering away that the abortion is the big issue. Vote Democratic if you want to retain the Roe Wade abortion protections. Republicans haven't mentioned that much because clearly the public opinion polls suggest that the abortion issue very clearly plays to the advantage of Democrats. On the other hand, the other issue, which is probably equal or maybe even surpasses the abortion one by one recent poll at least, is the whole area of the economy and inflation. And that's the issue Republicans have been hammering away on, blaming the Democrats for high inflation, for job losses, things of that nature. So again, those two themes have been bouncing back and forth. A few months ago, it looked like clearly the abortion issue was going to be the #1 issue and the dominant one. Again, at the moment, I've seen some polls in the last week that suggest that the economic issue is kind of rising up a little bit above the abortion issue by a couple of points. The bottom line is those two are competing for our attention in this election. Whether it's the abortion issue or the economy, they're hammering away at those on one part of the other. I think the other issue, or at least one other issue we're facing this time on the national level, is this is the real test of democracy. After all the distrust and claims that there was some kind of fraud and cheating in the 2020 election, this will be really a test of not only how well the election works, but whether or not there's trust in the election. And that may play an even bigger role in some ways in 2024. So again, the bottom line is, will it be seen as a fair election? Or will the January 6th hearings have any impact on the turnout and the reaction to what happens here in the election? Are we going to see endless challenges for the gubernatorial races and the other contests around the nation? And then one other thing on the national level, before I turn to something a little more on the Michigan here, is that one thing worth watching here is the kind of role that both Biden and Trump are going to play or not going to play in this election. What's interesting is that in the primaries, for Trump especially, he played a big role. I mean, his endorsement mattered an awful lot for an awful lot of Republican nominees. Once we got into the general election, all of a sudden now we haven't heard much about him. I think he made one visit to Michigan. He's made a few others here and there. But certainly there's not that many candidates who are showing you pictures of them side by side with Trump now compared to the primaries, when we were appealing primarily to a Republican Trump-oriented political base. And somewhat the same thing is true for Joe Biden. There's an awful lot of Democrats running who found out they were busy when Joe Biden was in town, because they didn't want to really be seen as Joe Biden, who's not all that popular either. So it's kind of interesting to see how candidates will play there. You'll see Biden has gone to some areas where Democrats are very strong, had a big margin to play with. But in those marginal districts, he's kind of stepped aside or those candidates running around. And you don't see that many candidates really running on Joe Biden. So those are some of the things going on in the national level. Let me take a look now. And I should also mention, if you want to ask questions as I go along, feel free to interrupt at any time. Let me take a quick look at the Michigan scenario here for openers. First of all, starting at the top, obviously, Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Tudor Dixon are going at it for a gubernatorial race here. At the moment, by almost every measure, there's a big lead for Whitmer. One poll I saw a couple of weeks ago gave her a 17-point lead. That's astonishing. That seems to have shrunk a little bit in the last week or so, which is hardly surprising for a major candidate. Whitmer's also got an enormous money advantage. Again, I saw some numbers a week or two ago, giving her almost a 28-to-1 advantage in dollars available for the campaign. For every dollar that Dixon has got, she's got $28. That may have tightened up a little bit in the last week or so, but again, huge monetary advantage for Whitmer at this point. And the other advantage that Whitmer's got is that, generally speaking, Michigan tends to give its governors a second term. In the last 60 years, Michigan has not failed to give any governor a second term. So history is sort of in her advantage as well. The key issues here, I think, of course, for Whitmer, let's kind of go through a quick shopping list here. The economy, obviously, she had a number of ads talking about how she's really brought some jobs back and tried to develop some chip manufacturing in Michigan and things like that. Obviously, fix the damn roads. That was her campaign slogan 4 years ago, and she's kind of hammered away at that in some ads as well this time around too. She's also really made a pitch here. This is kind of a contrast with Dixon in some ways, as somebody who can work in a bipartisan way. When she's talked about the budget, she's got a couple of ads out talking about a bipartisan budget agreement, and she has, when it came time to pass a state budget, has been able to really work with Republicans to some degree. And she's made a bit of a pitch for that at a time when we're so polarized along party lines that at least in some areas, she can work in a bipartisan. Education, another big thing she's hammering away at. She's increased the education budget and made a big issue of that in some of her ads as well. Talked also a little bit about climate change and water use as being kind of a future initiative. She mentioned that in one of her ads too. And would like to grow the state population. We've had a very dismal population growth rate here in Michigan for the last couple of decades, and has mentioned that too. For Dixon, on the other hand, she's not standing aside and doing nothing. She's hammered away at the pandemic. In Whitmer's hammering of the pandemic, there was a lot of backlash early in the pandemic, over 2 years ago, when Whitmer closed down almost everything, schools and businesses and so forth, and a lot of reaction against that. How well that sells 2 years later is hard to say, but clearly one of Dixon's major issues. She's hammering away at schools in a different issue, the whole area of social issues, about whether or not you can talk about gays in schools or critical race theory and so forth. She's using that as a hammer to raise her issues in the area of schools as well. And crime. Again, she's really talking about how tough she's going to be on crime, hiring more police, that kind of thing as well. She's also Dixon's come out support for Line 5. Big difference there between the two about whether you support or oppose Line 5 running through Michigan as well. For the Republicans, it was a very strange primary for Dixon. The Republicans at one point had 10 candidates running for the nomination for governor. And then 5 of them were kicked off the ballot because of flaws with their signatures. There was a particular signature gathering company that had all kind of problems. So 5 were disqualified right off the bat. And then what really put Dixon over the line was a kind of a last minute endorsement from Donald Trump. And then she did win the nomination rather handily. The debates, they just had debates last Tuesday, another one coming up next Tuesday, may have helped Dixon in some ways, in this sense. She was rather little known. I was surprised to see that by one poll a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, that almost 65% of folks in Michigan didn't even know who Dixon was. Simply being on the same stage with Whitmer may have helped her just to get better known. And it does seem like that the polls I've seen in the last couple of days suggest that things have tightened up just because she was there. And I think the bottom line is that in terms of how that last debate went, I don't know that there was any dramatic news out of that. But I think the fact of the matter is that Dixon came across, she handled herself well, she didn't, for someone who was not an office holder, who had not run for the major office before, she came across as relatively competent. So probably she gained a few points in that. As I don't think anybody struck a knockout blow, and I don't think there were any dramatic elements to that debate. But if you're the lesser known candidate, you get on the stage with a better known candidate, that normally works to your advantage. So again, I would say that debate, to some degree, maybe a small degree, may have helped Dixon. So as I say, bottom line is for the governor's race, you got to give Whitmer the edge right now. It's tightened up a little bit, but almost all the raw numbers seem to suggest she's got a pretty healthy edge for the government. Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson and Christina Caramo. Big issue there, really a couple issues. One of those for Republican Caramo is abortion. She made a real big issue about being against abortion. A little hard to say how that ties into being Secretary of State, but it's clearly been her campaign pitch so far. And again, another thing here, this really is, it goes back to what I said before about the election deniers. Caramo's a major election denier. The Secretary of State, you're in charge of a lot of election issues. This is one major issue that's going to feed into, but really a very often ignored job. You know, very often when we talk about Secretary of State, we're talking about, gee, how quick can you get your license plates and your registration taken care of? But with the election denying going on after 2020, those jobs, the Secretary of State and other election-related officials, really have become very, very more prominent than they have in the past. So again, I think I haven't heard much commentary on the election denial issue, but clearly the Secretary of State will have a major role in how we run our elections in the time to come. Again, polls show that Jocelyn Benson has got a decent margin, not quite as big as his Whitmer's, but a decent working margin there. As I say, Benson has really been kind of hammering away at the efficiency of the office that you now have to wait for just 20 minutes to get your plates or your registration taken care of compared to what it was in the past. Not a lot of hot button issues there, except for the election issue in large part. Next one we're voting against nationwide or statewide is the Attorney General, Dana Nessel and Matthew DePerno. Much closer race here by the current polls than the Governor or Secretary of State. What's interesting here, I think, is this, that some really bitter ads against DePerno. If you've seen those, claiming he was kind of a rough lawyer from that's come out in the last week or so. Very hard-hitting kind of things. One of the nastier ads I've seen in long campaigns. And again, here too, it's a little closer, but the odds tend to favor, I think, Dana Nessel. What's interesting about her campaign here is that I think the best ads that I think anybody's ever run for any campaign, it's not a political ad. If you've seen or heard, Dana Nessel did a bunch of ads kind of trying to warn you about scams. It was a little kind of, they were on the radio a lot, and a few of them on television. And they would have somebody, call Dana Nessel's parents and say, well, gee, Dana just called us and she's on the road and she wants a gift card from Target or Walmart or something. And what are we supposed to do? And then she'd come on and talk about how you got to be careful with this thing. They were kind of funny. They were humorous skits of sorts. They weren't campaign ads. But I think they probably did more for her campaign than the traditional campaign to say vote for so-and-so because they're a great candidate. DePerno, on the other hand, by the way, is facing some potential criminal charges over his activities on January 6th, which may or may not play a significant role in the campaign. So on that level there, in large part, probably you got to give on all three levels, give the Democrats an edge. I think they should go down the list. The advantage decreases a bit. But at least as things stand at the moment, probably Nessel the most vulnerable, probably Whitmer the most secure as we look at the top three offices in the state. A few other quick ones on the state level here. State Supreme Court, Democrats currently have a 4-3 advantage. Two incumbents are running. Richard Bernstein is a Democrat. Ryan Zahara is a Republican running for the Supreme Court. The challengers are Kyra Bolden, a Democrat, Paul Hudson, a Republican, and Kerry Morgan, a Libertarian, running for Supreme Court, which is a little unusual. You don't see Libertarians often running for the Supreme Court. They are this year around. What's interesting this year, a couple of things this year, quickly, statewide, a lot of new districts. You know, for the first time, we've got all these new districts all over the place after the Independent District Commission put those together with the intent, rather unusual. 3 minutes. Oh, I'll get that rush. With the intent of making districts more fair. For that reason, we may see a lot more competitive districts. Let me in my time left, let me take a little look at Dan Kilby's race here in Michigan. Dan Kilby and Paul Young, one of the most competitive districts now in the 8th congressional district that we're facing a huge amount of money being spent on those. You can barely turn on the TV with any kind of commercial break without seeing an ad for Kilby or Paul Young. New district is similar to the old one, but it kind of goes up from Genesee, Saginaw Bay, and now over to Midland County. which makes it a bit more Republican. This is probably the most competitive district Dan Kildee and probably even Dale Kildee has ever had to face. That since 1976, he's had a Kildee as member of Congress in this area. And it's, again, a pretty close race. Very briefly here, why Kildee could win and why Young could win in that district. Kildee could do it, first of all, the Kildee name. It's often everybody's known Dan Kildee or Dale Kildee for almost the last half century around here. Kildee made a big deal about some issues that he supported, the issues of drug price and insulin. He's got some very well-funded commercials, very well done, and a lot of money being poured in campaign on both sides. Strong ground game. He's out there, got folks going door to door, doing door knocking all over the place, more so than ever in the past, listening for him. The abortion issue, again, the Democrat playing hard on the abortion issue and running a number of commercials on that. If there's a good Democratic turnout, there's a large turnout, that should work to Dan Kildee's favor. And a couple of unusual ads. One ad that caught my attention for Dan Kildee was what I call a farm ad. Early in the campaign, there's an ad of Dan Kildee walking in a farm field, and there's a tractor nearby, and corn stalks or bean field out there, talking to the farm issues. I don't think they've ever done that before, but this is a little different district. This is an attempt to reach out to areas where he had not done so before. So I felt that a fairly creative ad for him. And also Chris Swanson ads on the Law and Order. Should get Chris Swanson doing an ad for him as well. Paul Young, on the other hand, could win because it's an anti-incumbent here. Folks may just be sick of being incumbents and could turn against Dan Kildee. And again, because Kildee name has been there for so long, there could be an awful lot of folks who are just kind of tired of the Kildee name and will go for anybody else. As I say, the new district is a bit more Republican. It went barely for Joe Biden by about 1.5% last time around, so it's much more competitive. Young is self-funding a lot of his campaign, and he's got a lot of money to put in, and he's done so in large part. If there's a low Democratic turnout, which is often the case in midterms, that could work well for Young as well. The economy and inflation. Young is hammering away at that. If folks are upset about inflation or economic issues, that probably could work in the advantage for them too. And he's also trying to tie Dan Kildee to Nancy Pelosi, as if he somehow works for Nancy Pelosi. Well, yeah, he voted for where every Democrat did. Every Republican voted for Republican when you vote for leadership in the House. So those Nancy Pelosi ads are kind of an attempt to tie him to somebody who's not on the top. Bottom line is probably Kildee's got a bit of an edge, but as I say, this is going to be a very competitive race. And all things considered, I think it's going to be the tightest race that Dan Kildee has ever had. And be worth watching to see how he handles it. How's my time going? Okay, I've got a few more things if you want to get into the state Senate, State House and all that. But bottom line, I'll stop right there and take questions. But, Joe.
Now, I don't know what we've been talking about this next. We're going to put a whole other thing on election.
Yeah, and then next week I'm going to do the mayor's race, the proposals, some school board issues, two brief words on the county commission.
Let me ask you about absentee ballots.
Oh, yes.
Very easy to vote now by absentee ballot. A lot of them out there. Does that tend to, favor one party?
Oh, yeah. That's one of my favorite topics for a lot of reasons. Historically, we've been a pandemic. A lot of us went to absentee ballots. The Michigan law changed a few years back to allow basically no reason absentee voting. And historically, if you go back in the past, the absentee vote had always been pro-Republican. That's changed. In the last 2 or 3 years, the absentee votes become much more Democratic. And we've seen a dramatic increase in absentee voting in large part because of the pandemic. And also, I think because it just is more convenient for an awful lot of people in many ways. And I'll tell you what, in a personal way, I had never voted absentee until the last couple of years of the pandemic. And I've gotten to be a fan of it for a couple of reasons. On one hand, it simply is more convenient. You sit at your home desk and fill out your ballot. But there's one reason why I think it really makes for a better informed voter. For those of us who are not political junkies, who follow all the candidates and read about proposals only, there's a lot of voters who walk into the polls on election. They don't, oh my God, it's election, they better go and vote. They walk in there and they see here, there's proposal number 27. What the heck is this? I don't know. And they'll read the first paragraph and they'll say, I guess it's okay, or they'll vote yes or no. You can make a seat of the pants judgment on these kind of things when you don't have time to study it. when you have an absentee ballot, you can take a look and find out, gee, what do I know about proposal 3 or 2 or 1? You can go to a website and call up a friend or look and find out some information in there. And the same thing is true for candidates. You know, you try and find out who's running for your township board of supervisors. There's a lot of folks who don't follow those races closely. And all of a sudden, if they can say, gee, let me find out who is my city council person, the township board or county commission and so forth. So I think it makes for a more informed electorate in many ways. As I say, right now, based upon past elections, the absentee vote has favored Democrats. There's another advantage, by the way, too, I think, for the absentee vote that I've thought about as well. And that is that because you have a paper ballot, it tends to kind of dissuade some of the election deniers. You know, some of the election deniers go, oh, there's all those funny things going on with those computers out there. Well, you got a stack of paper in front of you. You can sit down and count the thing if you need to. So it does kind of work against the election deniers as well. So I like them. So I really got to be kind of a fan of absentee voting in the last 2 years for at least those 2 reasons. Bob? I believe so. I think I've seen some stories to that effect, yes.
As far as one, where did that come?
I think in large part, I really don't know a concrete answer for sure. I think a large part, some COVID funds have certainly been able to bail out a lot of states. I suspect that's the major portion of it. But beyond that, I'm not sure I've got a clear answer for you. Feel free.
Steve, I was listening to Nolan Finley from the news yesterday. He seems to think that the momentum has shifted to the Republican challengers. Do you find that true from what you studied? And then he pointed out that of the three major state races, governor, attorney general, and secretary of state, that they were all within a margin of error. How do you explain the differences between the two polls?
Well, again, you're getting into exactly how they do the polling. I mean, in some cases, you got a margin of error of 3 or 4 points. When I usually got somebody at 50%, does that mean it's 46 or 54? That's a pretty good gap. So even a well done poll can do that. And frankly, some of those polls, there's a lot of serious science, kind of statistical stuff goes into some of that. But the real key thing is trying to select the folks who are going to vote. And that's the problem. I mean, if you just want to get a general feel of how Michigan feels, you can do that. But when you've got a voting turnout of 40%, 45%, how do you know exactly who's going to turn out? So that's really the catch. When you're interviewing 600 people, that'll give you about a 3 or 4% margin of error. But are you really hitting the folks who are going to vote? And it really is in many ways pure guesswork. And I'm sure that even today, there are probably an awful lot of folks who aren't even sure they're going to turn out to vote on, in 2.5 weeks on election day. It'll be depending on the weather. You know, the old line used to be that good weather on election day in November was good for Democrats, and bad weather was good for Republicans. It kept folks home. So that's not entirely true, but it has been true in the past. Yeah.
So in traditional campaigns and, early fall, a lot of heavy campaigns, we've seen with the onset of more absentee votes that a lot of times the elections decide a lot earlier campaigns are focusing on those absentee ballots with early ways. But are we seeing the effect on how campaigns are operating with the other side of that proposal being same day voter registration? How are they targeting voters when you can be registering folks up until the time of the poll?
Well, yeah, I think both campaigns are urging their voters to do that if they possibly can. Although I think the other thing that's true is, as your question suggests, is that a lot of campaigns are realizing that they've got to start early. And when people start voting several weeks or almost a month early, that you can't save your last ads for the week before the election when a lot of folks have cast their ballots. And I've seen over the years, many candidates have sent flyers to individuals saying, be sure to file for an absentee ballot. And by the way, don't forget to vote for so-and-so, because they're on your side. So I think the candidates are getting more aware of that. You know, I'm gonna, speaking of absentee, I'm gonna throw out one more thought. This is- I wish we had somebody here from the election division who actually ran elections. But it occurs to me, when I think about all the logistics that go into running an election, you know, here in Flint or in Genesee County, every November 8th or the August election, for one day, they got to drag out all those machines and all those tables and all those chairs and get all those volunteers to show up in schoolhouses and churches and all kind of other buildings. Pack them away, get everybody set up at 7 o'clock in the morning, have them sit there till 8 o'clock at night and drag all the stuff back to a warehouse someplace and then somehow tabulate all the votes. As I was thinking about the logistics that we go through for voting, and again, going back to my absentee kind of thing, wouldn't it be a lot more efficient if we all voted absentee? You didn't have to lug all that stuff around all over the county and find all these empty halls and rooms to stash these things and hope that everybody shows up and hope that everybody knows what they're doing and everything else. So again, that's kind of a side thought. I'm not sure it's going to happen. We're out of time. All right.
That's right. This is a conversation to be continued for next week for sure. All right, my friends. So, we'd like to say thank you again for everybody who is involved in helping to make this meeting happen today. So, Fred, for our raffle, even though he won 2 out of 3 prizes, I think that's rather remarkable, but seeing as I'm the person who won the 3rd, I guess I can't complain. Thank you to Rob Newell for the speaker introduction and arranging the program for today. Thank you very much, Amy Cruz, for our inspirational message as well as setup and takedown today. And thank you, of course, to Don for your meeting notes for today. Appreciate it. And I don't think there's going to be a quiz next week, but it's nice to know that if there were, you all would be well prepared. So we will be back next week on Friday, where Paul will join us again. And that time, as you mentioned, we'll be focusing more on the municipal elections as well as the statewide ballot initiative. And as a reminder, next Friday will be the day before a certain football game. So if you happen to wear your green and white that day, that is most welcome. If you have to wear maize and blue, I suppose that's also acceptable. Oh, it could be a rough one this year. But in any case, we'll have some fun. We'll razz each other a little bit. We'll come back together the next week. With that, thank you so very, very much. Paul, donations have been made in your honor towards Rotary International polio eradication efforts. As a way of saying thank you for all you do. And thank you to all Rotarians here today and our guests. As we leave here today, let's think about imagining Rotary, not just what it means for us personally or our community, but our whole world. So thank you so much, and we are adjourned.